Well, it's March 20th, and I thought I would go over a few items. I want to cover the latest developments in the Dereck Chauvin trial about George Floyd's death up in Minneapolis. But first, I want to kind of make a few other issues. Of course, I think most people saw the little tumble that Joe Biden took climbing up the steps on the airplane yesterday. And that's, well, I think that's one of those things that you can have happen. And it may well be due to the fact he was just trying to run up the steps too briskly for his age and should have been being more careful. In other words, it's not clear that he couldn't have slowly walked it up without tripping up, but he did trip up. And so that's the right is making a big deal of it. And of course, as usual, we'll have to say nothing to see here. So we're not, I just thought I'd mention that's some of the later developments. I guess we have a couple of immigration bills that have passed the House. One of them, which was the one with the farm labor, actually got 30 Republican votes, but of course that was, from what I can tell, mostly a lot of farm vote Republicans primarily, and then maybe a few others, which always shows that the issue with illegal immigration is that weird twist between people that want cheap labor on the one hand and the people that want the easy votes on the other hand. Kind of an alliance of destruction. Okay, so let's get on with the Chauvin trial issue. On jury selection, I guess we're down to, we've got 12 jurors, I guess, selected and one alternate. I think the 13th one is an alternate, and there's a 14th. They're going to do another alternate also, which they were unable to get a whole lot done yesterday afternoon. Going back a little bit, things that happened earlier in the week, one of the things that's disrupted the trial has been the announcement of the $27 million civil settlement that the city did. It's obvious that the people in the city are doing everything they can to bias the trial as possible against Chauvin. I think that's pretty clear-cut why they're doing that, because in a previous trial, which they had, or I think that's where the Australian woman was shot for no particular reason, and in that case, that they actually released the results of the civil settlement and at the same day the jury verdict was going to be released. So they kind of synchronized them so as not to influence each other. Here they're not showing similar restraint. So that's, one of your little things that you notice there. But at any rate, the judge at that time, I think, had already picked, was it 9 jurors or 7? At any rate, I think it was 9. I think he had 9 jurors picked at that point. And he called them back in to question them about whether they'd been influenced by the by that settlement. He kind of asked them, did they hear about any developments related to the case? And basically 2 people had heard it and seemed to indicate that would have influenced them some way, or I actually got to hear on the Watching the Watchers thing, which is a lot longer than my video. So if you really want to get the original stuff and sit around for lengthy periods of listening, you can go to that. But at any rate, I would say that basically, I thought the two, what I thought were favorable for the defense jurors got kicked off out of this because they made something like comments like it might have affected them in some way, and it struck me like they were just more unclear what to say rather than they really were about ready to go over to the convict side. But whatever, they were kicked off then, and they had to go back to selection. And the jury right now, I would say, is a little bit more favorable for the prosecution than it would have been otherwise. But again, that's my read, and maybe I'm wrong on that. It's hard to know. I'm just judging the things that they'd said. Right now, the jury, I think, is consisting of, if I get this right, 5 white. Well, the 12 that will really be the main jury, unless there's somebody excused, there's 6 white, 2 multiracial, and 4 black. On the racial mix, and they range from their 20s all the way up to, I think, the 60s in age. I'd say most of the people on there tend to be things like, okay, take this female retired lady, African American, had worked in marketing and was turned off by the Floyd video, but seemed to be a little bit more neutral on the police. It was kind of like, well, almost all these people, of course, have all said they can be fair and objective and consider the evidence that the judge presents to them in the court, and follow the law as he gives it to them. No jury nullification people here, I guess, huh? And so they had one that yesterday they were looking at was a young, I think a college student of some sort, or maybe graduate. I couldn't quite get that right because I got interrupted in the middle of listening to it. But essentially, who'd actually been in a BLM protest and obviously kind of had a negative viewpoint of the police, but he kind of said he could be objective and open to changing his mind. So, but he ended up getting dismissed, I think with a judge, on that case, or it might have been a peremptory challenge by the defense. There was one that I thought was perfect for the defense that just came in, and this guy, of course, he got through the judge okay on being eliminated for cause, but it was a peremptory challenge by the prosecution. So we're almost there. We have one more alternate to pick. The first alternate was in customer service. She likes dogs, and she was kind of again had a negative reaction to the video of the incident with Floyd, but at the same time, she realizes if somebody resists arrest, the police have to do something. Almost all the people that get on there kind of express these kind of non-committal type attitudes, and so we don't know what they're really thinking. I mean, the real issue is does the person really want to get on the jury, and are they enough of an actor or clever enough, if they want to get on the jury, to say the right things, versus the idea that they want to get off the jury or maybe deliberately saying the wrong thing so they'll be kicked off by somebody. I think for anybody with a sufficient skill, either one's fairly good. The one guy that they kicked off had an uncle that had worked in police work at the sheriff's department, and apparently had been injured or something, ended up having a stroke, and it was related somehow to a struggle with an inmate, it sounded like. And I guess the prosecution didn't want him on there. So the net view of this, the jury, the way it's shaping up right now, is kind of I guess you'd say a balanced jury. It could very well be the kind of jury that could end up hanging, actually, I think, potentially. I mean, just because of the nature of it. If they're objective and do what they said they'll do, in my opinion, they probably will end up acquitting him, because I think that the big problem that the prosecution is going to have is to establish beyond a reasonable shadow of a doubt that the action taken by Officer Chauvin was, in fact, the cause of George Floyd's death. I mean, there's no dispute George Floyd died, and there's no dispute that there was a struggle, and there's no dispute that maybe it looks very bad about the knee on the neck technique. But to actually prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that's what caused his death, given the fact that he was had a lethal level of fentanyl in his system. Now, as I understand it, the prosecution experts are going to claim, I guess, that because of his extensive drug use, he would somehow be able to have withstood that level of fentanyl and not have died of it, I guess. As I understand, that's going to be the counter-argument they're going to bring into the case. So, and again, that's, however, it seems to me, since there's two plausible theories that'll both be argued by experts and with an instruction of beyond a reasonable doubt, there is a reasonable doubt. I mean, you could even kind of conclude that Chauvin's a bit of a thug, but that he didn't necessarily, it's unclear whether or not he actually caused the death. And to get either manslaughter or murder, you have to show that the defendant actually caused the death beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think that is the essence of the defense there. And okay, and that's one reason why it didn't get charged with first degree, obviously, because that would, then they'd have to show they actually intended to cause his death. I mean, and I think that's with premeditation. So I think that's why that never was brought up. So, all right, it kind of gives you a rundown. So we'll see what happens. I think the judge, another important thing that came up was an argument in which the judge decided on some evidence there was a previous arrest of about a little bit over a year earlier of the same of George Floyd, and if all the evidence came in, it would be kind of you would have a really good context for what actually happened in the incident we're all familiar with. In a similar case, he apparently gulped down some drugs so he wouldn't get caught with them, and then he basically went into the same kind of hysterical behavior, and he was even calling for his mother at some point during the arrest. Okay, so in other words, which is probably the most gut-wrenching part of the original video. I mean, you just sit there and, like I said in my previous one on this, the first one I addressed the subject, my initial reaction was, this is horrible. But then, if he did the same thing in another case where he survived, made it to the hospital, and at the time I think his blood pressure was systolic well over 200, his diastolic around 160, plus he had arterial sclerosis. You can see that this is an individual apparently who has hypertension and is not under medical treatment for it, I guess, or isn't taking his medicines or something. So you can see how that really natural causes just due to the stress of being arrested and caught with illegal drugs may be what led to his death in the case in question, on last year. But the question was, would the judge allow the evidence in? The answer was not exactly, but he's willing to let in those parts of the evidence that are directly related to the cause of death, but not other things that are surrounding it, like him calling for his mother and his behavior, as I understand. So it's kind of a half win for the defense, but it's a significant win for the defense, because if that evidence had been totally excluded, people would have no context at all with what's going on. I disagree with the judge and with this lawyer I'm watching on this Robert Ruler. I understand his point of view, and that is that just the question in my mind was bringing in this evidence from the previous arrest in 19. They're looking at it sort of along the lines of, okay, he did this before, therefore, in other words, the idea that that essentially it makes him look like the guilty person. But my view is that Floyd isn't on trial, and the question is was that be relevant to understand what you saw in the last year video from May of 2020? And I think it really is, because it lets you understand that he has a certain routine he goes into, and that. But the medical evidence will be allowed in, and of course it's going to be kind of tight, because if the defense goes too far, then they're going to let some other testimony in, apparently, that the prosecution wants. So it's kind of a balanced situation there. Generally speaking, I think the judge is trying to be fair, and it's a difficult situation with all the influences. But anyway, I just thought I'd kind of get you up to date. So I guess we got one more alternate to pick on Monday, and then I guess things will go forward. I am a little interested that nobody has raised the issue that I raised in my first video on this, about the idea that actually keeping Floyd on his side might have been helpful, given the fact that he had a fentanyl overdose. And that, I would think that would mitigate the idea of cause of death. If they laid him on his back, that itself might have led to his death. The other thing, of course, if he hadn't resisted arrest, this whole thing wouldn't have happened, obviously. Which is one of those things. I personally don't see how a knee on the side of the neck could kill him myself. His neck was not, there's no claim his spinal cord was broken, or his neck wasn't broken. There's no evidence, I don't think, that he was asphyxiated, at least according to the coroner report. And so I don't see how, I think it was probably very unpleasant, but I don't see how it caused the death. I think it's much more likely that he probably also had the same problem in the previous case of very high blood pressure and congestive heart disease, and he died of a heart attack. But anyway, so that's kind of my rundown on what we learned about the Chauvin trial this week, and we'll see how things proceed next week. Of course, I guess we'll maybe get on to see how H.R. 1 fares in the Senate. And if anything does move on the filibuster rules or not. Hopefully they won't, but I did see it. By the way, I'll briefly mention this. I did see an article on Salon where they're raising many of the same issues that I raised in my previous video. That it's unclear what change short of completely eliminating the filibuster would actually, grease the skids for the kind of passage of all these radical House bills that some Democrats want to pass. And so, because basically having lengthy talking filibusters will actually clog up the Senate even more than just doing it with cloture votes and going on to the next issue. At any rate, I'll close this video for now until next time.